copyright protections and such things. He installed and ran the first Ethernet and Internet for business, and then started making products. And he started with Chuck Yeager's flight simulation, and then first Genesis titles at EA, and has now, to his credit, titles we all love and favorite ones such NHL, Madden, and latest one, Tiger Woods. In 2000, he started teaching master production classes at EA, and just about a year back, he assumed the large shoes of Bing Gordon as Chief Creative Director at Electronic Arts. So please join me in welcoming Richard Hilleman, Electronic Arts.
Good afternoon. From time to time, I do a presentation. We have a little awards ceremony in the interactive entertainment business called the DICE Awards, which is held every year in Las Vegas. And our co-host is a guy named Jay Moore. Anybody know who Jay is? There you go. So Jay's famous for his phrases, but what he used to describe it is, he says, I come in here and the dirt on the feet of the people who walk in the door are smarter than me. And that's pretty much how I feel today. So I sat through 2 hours this morning, and I think I understood 3 acronyms in 2.5 hours. So I guess I'm getting old now. But anyway, what I thought I'd talk a little bit about is the other side of the equation. So I work in a business that doesn't have a reason to exist. Any of you who have children, I'm sure, are cursing me as we currently speak. As I usually get up, I apologize in advance. I've been in the business for 25 years. Yes, it is all my fault. What I thought I'd talk about today is 5 Ps that are having a big impact, I think, on our business and on our future. I think the hardware business is inevitably the leader of everything that we do. When I'm trying to figure out the future, what I do is a couple things. I go see the markets that are emerging in the world, talk about one of those in a moment, and then I go look and see what hardware is selling to the people who are going to build the machines I run on in the future. And so it's been a kind of exciting time, but a big change time, the biggest change time I can remember since I've been in the business since 1983. So it's kind of an exciting time, and I'm looking forward to what you guys can do to help me. So let's see. Oh, goody, I get to go press the button. We'll do that. So let's see here. Since it's about chips, you know, like I said, you guys see the future. This is about the present that I see. The kind of 4 to 5 dominant things that dominate our business. One of them is profit. Anybody who's been in the business for the last 1.5 years has suddenly recognized that the world can occasionally change economically, and you have to react to that. Power, increasingly in my business, either the components that we're running on are mobile and have to run on battery power, or are running on servers where the power constraints are a major component of our economic evaluation. And so power is not the kind of thing that my business literally spent any portion of the last 25 years thinking about, but is about to dominate our business. Persistence. In this particular case, what I mean by persistence is that people want their identities, their entitlements, the stuff that they have to follow them around device to device, location to location. They are no longer patient with having a bunch of little islands that they keep synced. People. Fundamentally, what's one of the biggest changes in my business is that no longer is video games about your 14-year-old son going in his room, turning out the lights, and closing the door. Increasingly, gaming is a very social activity. The fastest growing piece of the traditional console business over the last 3 years has been the Wii business. And that is completely about playing games on this side of the screen, where the fun of the game is really about who you're playing with much more than what's going on the screen. And so people have become a bigger portion of what we're doing. And there's a last one here that I don't think is high on your list. We'll save that one for the end. So who am I? Well, let's see. You know, as I got introduced, I came to Silicon Valley in 1983. I was born in a place called Rochester, Minnesota, in southern Minnesota. I grew up in the Minneapolis area until I was about 14. I had the good fortune of going to an elementary school in Hopkins, Minnesota, which is where Honeywell's computer corporate headquarters were at the time. And so in 1972, my elementary school had a computer. And I got to get out of math class if I could program the computer. I'd do anything to get out of math class. In 1975, I moved to possibly the most different cultural place in America you could go to from Minneapolis. And I learned about guys with broken noses, and I learned about Howard Hughes' legacy in that place. This is quite a different place. It actually helped me a lot in my current job. Human behavior is on naked exhibition at Las Vegas every day. When I got out of high school, I got kind of a strange job. So anybody know what's 60 miles north of Las Vegas, Nevada? There's a hint up there. That's right, the Nevada test site. So I spent 4 years working at the test site, which means that when I go to a party, I have definitely had the 2 weirdest jobs in the room, hands down. Making video games for 25 years and previously working in nuclear weapons. In the time that I went to EA in 1983, I was the 39th employee, and as Pradeep was talking about, I was there to solder cables and copy disks and put Apple IIs together and make printers work and conquer the wiles of RS-232 communication, all of those kinds of things. But I happened to find my way into production, and the very first product I worked on was Chuck Yeager's Flight Trainer. Chuck Yeager's Flight Trainer was #1 in the country for about 14 months. That's a wonderful thing, but then what do you do? So I was very lucky. We had a lot of fun with that product. I learned a lot. Chuck is a fabulous guy. If you ever get the chance to spend time with him, he's a lot of fun. The next product that I'm kind of famous for is I worked on the very first version of John Madden Football. And that was a big change for us. Probably you don't remember, but sports products before John Madden Football sold about nothing. They were about 2% of the market. Last juncture, they were about 33% of the market. This product and its follow-on, NHL, pretty much helped create that market along with the Lakers Celtics product that we built at that time. And that has been the basis of what EA Sports is for us. I worked on a number of other things, and then a couple of years later, they asked me to work on golf products. And my joke at the time was that, I know a lot about making video games, and one of the primary rules is you can make any video game 20% better by the application of a flamethrower. Didn't seem like it was going to apply here. So we spent a lot of time on that, and we made a lot of progress, and then Dave DeMartini and Mike Olson and a number of other people have taken on that gauntlet and made really a stupendous product. We'll show you kind of their latest evolution later on today. Let's see here. So after that, I've spent a lot of time at EA. I've done a bunch of different jobs. I've been a producer, a designer, a production head, a general manager. I still spend a lot of my time teaching. And I'm currently Chief Creative Director, which is kind of a funny way of describing I do what John Rigatello asked me to do. Part of my role, about 25% of my job, is education. I spend time teaching at major universities and internally, either master design or production classes, or leadership classes, often in the context of universities are where I spend my time. The other 2 aspects of what we do is we're really the corporate R&D component of Electronic Arts. So we worry about things that we think are 2 to 5 years out. And then we manage our relationships with our technical relationships with the platform providers, the traditional people you think of like Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, but also people like Adobe and Intel and several other folks who might not normally make your list that we think of as platform providers. So that's probably my real job, is to be a troublemaker at EA. And after 25 years, I'm doing my best to hold on to it. So who is EA? For those of you who don't know, it's the very first ad EA ever did. These are 7 kind of wonderful people, 8 wonderful people that helped us get the project started. Mike Abbott, and Matt Alexander, John Field, the late Dan Button, whose current son works for me. That's the coolest thing. Dave Maynard, whose son used to work for me. John and Ann Westfall, and Bill Budge up in the upper right-hand corner. Bill Budge, just last year, finally won an Emmy for Pinball Construction Set from 1983. I think they were a little late with that award. This is kind of the key history of the company I work for those of you who don't know. We started out as a company called Amazing Software. Thank God that name didn't stick. We entered Europe in 1985, went IPO in 1990 or in 89. We added EA Canada, which is our single largest studio, later on in the 90s. We acquired Maxis, the home of SimCity, The Sims, and Spore. In the mid-90s, Tiburon and Westwood were acquired. Westwood in Las Vegas, Tiburon in Florida, DreamWorks Interactive. We bought a lot of stuff. So we got 9,500 people on a worldwide basis versus the 39 that I started with, and I don't know all their names anymore. But it's been a big company, and we've learned to do a lot of different things. One key component to look up there is something called Pogo.com. Very interesting little business that we have. It has a couple of million subscribers, almost all of which are 35-year-old women. So those of you who think games are all about 15-year-old boys, the world has changed. We've been in operation for 28 years, #1 market share in US and Europe. Revenue about $4.3 billion last year. About 9,000 employees worldwide, strong partnerships with lots of different people. Kind of a lot of stuff. Got a lot of people, build a lot of products in-house, got a lot of partners. And we're very interested still in the entertainment business. We don't do anything else but that. We're in a lot of places, publish in 36 countries, 25 languages, usually shipping products in up to 9 languages simultaneously on day one. About 1,200 SKUs published, total lifetime. That number's about to explode with online. So these are the kinds of things that, my PR department wants to make sure I show you that slide. All right, now we're done. OK, so changing demographics. I've made my bosses happy now. One of the things that's really been interesting about our business is that for the first 20 years or so, we spent almost all of our time worried about a relatively narrow component of the market. About 50 million people on a worldwide basis define themselves as gamers. So our traditional hardcore gamers play about 24 hours a week. It's a lot, it's a part-time job. Those people, when they play that, are usually pretty focused on that. They spend a lot of their time worrying about what games are coming out, and they tend to identify themselves by platform. So you're a PlayStation gamer, or you're a 360 gamer, or you're a Nintendo guy. Generally, that's how people define themselves. Let me talk about another customer. I'll have at the same time another customer who will play 22 hours a week. And that customer does not define themselves as a gamer. And that's one of those Pogo customers. And so what's interesting has been that we've had a bunch of new gamers come online. Things like Pogo are representative of that. The Wii is representative of that. Games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero, which clearly challenge the notion of immersive gaming being the dominant form. Almost all of the growth in my business has come out of these new changing demographics. New markets coming online that are not part of the core. So that's a key thing that's going on in our business. There have been all of these new kinds of businesses that have been emerging, running on platforms that aren't hardware, ranging from widgets, things that have plugins that go inside of either Facebook or some other application that allow gaming to fit in the context of a social construct. Flash portals, which are destinations for small-time gaming that are quick in and quick out. Digital downloads that have been around for the better part of 15 years now. That seems to be sliding a little bit away. And then skilled gaming, which is playing for money or playing for other assets. This is a very interesting business that is still a legal quagmire, at least in the US. There have been all these other things, too. So who knows what an MMO is? Good. Oh, we got some World of Warcraft players in here, I can tell. OK, so massively multiplayer online game. World of Warcraft is the best example, but is not the biggest one in the world. The biggest one in the world is MapleStory, which is a Chinese and Taiwanese product that way outstrips World of Warcraft in players, probably not in dollars, but everything else. There are casual and online MMOs. That's a good example of one of those. Gameforge dominates that space, but if you get to Asia, it's a totally different window. These virtual world games, who in here has a child who's got Webkins? Don't you wish you invented that? Crack for kids. It's just terrible. And then finally, there's a whole collection of new ad-serving businesses that are out there. And so really what's happened is this whole business kind of just sprung up over about the last 5 years and is not something that we have paid a lot of attention to outside of Pogo. Let's see, how many people do we have from Korea? Anybody? Nobody. Has anybody been to Korea? OK. Who knows what an IGR is? Nobody. There you go. What is an IGR? Internet gaming room. There are about 28,000 of them in Korea. It's a truly amazing thing to see. It's basically a return to the land of the arcades of the 80s. It's pretty much amazing. And they're built the same way, too. You don't make any money off the games. You make it off of Doritos and Cokes. So it's run the exact same way. This is an example of a very nice one. There's no cigarette smoke here, so it's a very nice one. But people will walk into these places and make 20 hours of their lives disappear. And this isn't a place that has ubiquitous internet to their house that's as good or better than it is to that place. So there's something magic about that place, and I think it's, again, social interaction between people. The core will play by themselves, but the non-core will not. So Korean online gamers are a pretty interesting group. There's 4.2 million people in the country. Not a lot, but California. There are 22 million of them, almost half that are online gamers. And of those, 13.9 million are the tweeners. Of those online gamers, the vast majority of them play MSGs. Some of them play casual games, and the rest play massively multiplayer games. This is a big chunk of people, guys. That's not the core anymore. That's everybody. And it used to be in the 80s that when I wanted to go see the future, got in an airplane and I flew to Japan. Not anymore. I go to Japan to see the past. I go to Korea to see the future. What's also interesting is what the games are up here, most of which you have never heard of. So for instance, Lineage, StarCraft, Lineage 1 and Lineage 2, Warcraft, and MapleStory, which I just pointed out to you, you've heard of, but literally, Diablo is up there too. Literally, you've never heard of the rest of those games, and they have plays in the millions on a daily basis. So again, another market emerging that's totally different. It gives you some idea of how that business is working. Finally, the other key thing is look at the percentage of leisure time and what we're dominating over. We're almost beating TV with the really youngs, and then after that, we get TV and it's all over. So for the greatest extent, we've gone from a supplementary entertainment business in Korea to the dominant entertainment business in Korea. Now, not that I had anything to do with it, but it gives you an example of what's happening. And the reason why, I think, is because gaming is no longer a core activity, it's a mainstream activity. So is the console business a model in decline? Well, it's been a struggle for the last couple of years. So the folks at both Microsoft and Sony built fabulous pieces of hardware and just about died trying to get those things done. The complexity of those machines from both the hardware and software, and in particular in the software side, nearly destroyed those organizations that built them. They essentially collapsed over the finish line. I'd make the case Sony didn't actually finish their platform until 2 years after they shipped it. So the net effect for us has been that we don't think that the next turn is happening very fast. We got used to in our business seeing a big platform turn about every 5 years. I have my position. I've said there will, PlayStation 4, we're going to see a PlayStation 3.5 before we see a PlayStation 4, and we're going to see an Xbox 560 before we see a 720. And so I think that we're going to see more iteration in that cycle and a lot more focus on software than has been true in the past. But the traditional hardware gaming model, with the economics that have driven it up until now, I think that is in re-engineering phase right now as we speak, with online being a big piece of the future for that. Most of the growth is in some pretty interesting places. So these are platform, boy, what a lousy slide. Sorry, guys. But anyway, it shows what's happening with packaged goods versus non-packaged goods. And if you take a careful look, the bars that are getting wider on the right generally are the mobile and online ones, things that are not connected to a tangible packaged goods product. The biggest shift going on in our business is how fast packaged goods is changing and going away, for a wide variety of reasons. We'll talk about a few of those in a moment. So the other thing that's true is if you kind of look at the PC business by its traditional measure, it looks like it's in decline. We have a disproportionately large piece of the PC business, mostly because we have the Sims business, which is about 25% of the traditional PC business. But the truth is that the packaged goods business, the green line that's been pretty flat for the last several years, is not representative of what's really happening on the PC. The Sims 3, as we make it today, they're going to produce 60 million, I believe, netbooks over the next year and a half or so. And the Sims 3 doesn't currently run on those systems. That's going to be a problem for us. We're going to fix that. But the growth within the PC business has really diverted. There is both the hardcore $4,000 water-cooled, rape-aped, sitting underneath your desk, best PC you've ever seen in your life until tomorrow. And then there is the commodity PC. And increasingly, people are value-oriented and are not interested in the power differential between the $4,000 unit and the $300 netbook. It isn't consequential to them any longer. And so that's a big change for us. We're going to have to start making products for that other PC platform. The core game matters to us. We'll continue to make those. That is probably, I describe it as the art film of our business. It's where a lot of the innovation takes place. But increasingly, those smaller platforms are going to be a bigger and bigger portion of what we do, and we're going to have a specific focus to accomplish that. So what you really see is you see that we've got a kind of really explosion of platforms here. A couple of years ago, we really only had about 4 things to worry about. We had the DS, Nintendo GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. And now I got this, plus a whole collection of online platforms that aren't even defined by what I see up here. So for us, we have to sort this mess out. And we have to figure out which customers are where. Something else to think about, our launch costs have gone up. So when we first did EA Sports, we used to have an internal joke about what people would kind of roll in with something and try and call it EA Sports. So it's, you know, I got this great fantasy role-playing game, and it's just like a sport, so let's call it EA Sports, because we'll sell more. We obviously had to get to some point where we had to define what EA Sports was, and for us, that finally came down to EA Sports products are whatever we can advertise on SportsCenter. Basically, if it would work on SportsCenter as a piece of advertising, that's EA Sports. So it's a funny, goofy definition, but it meant that we aligned ourselves around the most difficult task in our business, which was marketing the products. And so what's interesting is that that model, although useful for the core, doesn't really extend out of it and is getting increasingly expensive. We will generally spend somewhere between 2 and 3 times what we spend on the product development process in marketing. That is not true in the past, but that is increasingly true in the core. So to get those core, get those top 10 positions on the chart, you have to pay to get them, essentially. So generally, the other thing that's been going on here is product costs have been going up. And I love the fabulous resolution that we get out of these current generation of products, but the simple fact is resolution equals content, and content equals people. And people equals money. And so for us, we went from a development team probably in the mid-'80s that might have had 3 people on it. When we shipped the Godfather product, I believe there were 475 credits on that title. That's more than the movie had, by the way. So a high-definition team right now, you know, starts to look quite big and nasty, and has a lot of people on it, and a lot of specialists. You know, I need an 11th shader engineer on that project. I need 14 designers, because I got 3 levels, each that have to be meticulously played. The higher the resolution, the more my animation has to be terrific, not adequate, because every single thing that goes wrong shows up. By the way, we don't seem to have enough women, do we? But the net result of that is basically the higher the resolution, the higher the expectation standards out of the customer base, the higher the production values I have to bring, the more expensive that process is. And the harder it is to organize, by the way. So enough of that. You get the idea. High-def teams are big. By comparison, so the Wii is really a generation older machine. It's a 480p machine. That simple 480p choice, reducing resolution to approximately a quarter, and the game focus, which is mostly on gameplay at this stage, really reduces these teams. Suddenly a team of 300 is a team of 30. And it's a really manageable thing, and I can take risks there. It's a good thing because I have to. The Wii is a game mechanic-based system, and game mechanics are the riskiest thing in our business to try and do new. Got a few more girls, though. That's good. What's interesting is, then there's this thing. The girls finally won. The iPhone is the other definition of what's changed. So there's been a democratization of the gaming business. And there are parts of my mobile division who this makes them tear out their hair. But I happen to think it's a good thing. We got a whole generation of new game designers that are coming online when, frankly, wasn't very much of that in the 80s and 90s. So I'm really appreciating that this is happening. I think it's a great opportunity. And these are talent that we can then walk up the ladder to higher production value products and get better things out of them. So I'm unconcerned about this trend, but it is a trend. And that changes the profitability of that business and changes our barriers to entry, because being great at running 300 people teams doesn't do you any good on a one-person iPhone product. This is kind of the other thing. So there's that first word up there, piracy. I've spent most of my career at one point or another dealing with copy protection or piracy issues. And it's not a good job. I'd advise, if you get offered the job to be in the copy protection business, major entertainment software company, turn it down. But the facts are, it's a fact of our lives, and what's changed is our ability to measure it has changed. So what you see up here is a chart that shows the number of users versus the number of units that we sold. of a game called Burnout Paradise. And Burnout Paradise has the interesting distinction of having more users than units sold. Something has gone sideways there, I would believe. So there are two candidates for that problem, and I think they're both in play. The first one is obvious, which is people have figured out how to pirate the software, and that's been a kind of well-understood problem on at least two of the platforms for the last year or so. But the other one is something that's really emerged in the last year. So who here has been to a GameStop in the last year? Did you buy a new product or a used one? That's bad news for my guys, but I understand. That's really the other aspect of this, is second sale products. And in the case of Burnout Paradise, it's kind of a shame. Burnout as a product went out with X amount of content, and literally every 30 days, we were all at about another 20% of new assets, content, locations in the world. We've literally added a whole island to the world in an update. If you go back and sell your unit, you miss out on all that stuff. So the issue for us has been convincing people that that enduring trail of value is worth keeping their copy and keeping them engaged. What I'm interested in is keeping them as a customer. I want to make them happy. I want to bring them to this business in a more kind of substantial way. The net effect of second sale has been to hurt what we call catalog sales. And so that makes our products sell with a less long tail, which means that our business is all about 3 to 6 weeks, and then it's less exciting after that. So those are kind of some of the effects that are driving our business. Lots of demographics, some technology changes. The online markets are blowing up. As you can see, we talked a little bit about the Korean market before. It's a bigger and bigger piece of the business, and the whole notion of products as packaged goods versus products as services is a big change in our business and will change us in fundamental ways. And so we're in the middle of that process. That's going to incarnate itself in a lot of different ways. I'm going to talk about one of them here in a moment. So the other thing that's happened in our business has been the emergence of handhelds. So right now, on a worldwide basis, current generation platforms, between the Wii, the 360, and the PlayStation 3, right around 100 million units on a worldwide basis. How many DSs, PSPs, and iPhone and iTouches are there? Literally twice as many of those. And by the way, we're finding these to be at least as active as the hardcore core guys are at buying software and being on the systems. So it's a big, huge change, a big new group of players, and it's outside of that normal group. Finally, there have been some other things that have been emerging that probably matter even more. So anybody here from Adobe? Oh well, I'll do my Adobe advertisement anyway. Then there's 1 billion flash installs. That's fairly consequential in our business. From our perspective, this is increasingly where the noise is going. Not just in the US, but in particular in Asia and the newer developing markets of Eastern Europe. Almost all of that business is not traditional hardware consoles, but is online businesses. And so increasingly, we're going to have to figure out how to reach those guys. It's kind of personified by the emergence of the netbooks over the last year and a half, which are really the platform of choice for these customers. So new customers, you know, the Wii and the iPhone have brought customers that haven't normally been involved in our business. They don't self-identify as gamers, and as a result, we have a much more tenuous hold on them. When I described earlier that our core business was built up of folks who had lifestyle really was gaming, that's not really true for these folks. If I'm going to sell a product to somebody in this space, I cannot dominate their life. I cannot have a game that requires 3 hours every session that they sit down and play. I cannot ask for them to forego their children, their job, or every other aspect of their lives. In fact, I got to fit into their lifestyle. And so, you know, chances are if I ask somebody in this space, are they a gamer? They go, you mean am I a golfer? Yes, I'm a golfer. And so in their context, what they're interested in is a game that fits into the lifestyle that is as a golfer. So, you know, we happen to make Tiger Woods. That's a good match for these guys. But it's an example of how these new audiences outside of the core will not identify themselves as a gamer, and several of the characteristics of gamers they do not wish to be associated with, like the time losses. So what I've got is I've got a little summary here of about 5 different customers that we think are our customers of the future and give you some idea what they look like. Thomas is pretty typical of the guys that you think of what we do today. He's actually a professional gamer. I think something on the order of $2 million was paid last year in Madden-related tournament prizes, meaning guys who played John Madden football for money. Often at a bar, sometimes for us, sometimes for ESPN. but it's a real game. And so as a result, these guys have gotten really focused. For him, he subscribes to our current Madden system to get the latest coaching and scouting combine information, because our game models literally change every day. The players in the lineups and their ratings now change every single day. For him to stay up on that, he's got to have help. He plays skill-based games for money, and he participates in the Madden Challenge, which is essentially the World Championship of Madden. Very important to his particular sense of who he is. Gina doesn't think she's a gamer. Gina currently uses our EA Active product, which is the #1 Nintendo title in the country in July. She uses the home console for her exercise. She uses her iPhone to add calorie consumption information and incidental exercise to that system. And then she subscribes to the Active system, getting updates of new exercises that are added to her system all the time. She doesn't think she's a gamer. For her, it's a piece of utility. Essentially, what we've done is we've crossed over to utility software. This is Molly, not a gamer. She plays Pogo and all other small games on her cable-based Gaikai system. She likes playing with her grandchildren, but mostly likes social opportunities. People who play Pogo are at least as interested in chat as they are in the games. It's a social conduit for them to connect with people that they know. And these are not audiences that are typically on Facebook today. This is the Thompson family. This is the group I'm the happiest with that's emerged. People who play video games together as families and do so in the right way. So for instance, this is the family that plays together and stays together. They play family game night every Friday. They play a game every Friday rather than go out to a movie. James and Paula, which are the two smallest ones, two ones in the front here, they're the coaches for mom and dad. And they rent their game of the night. So they don't actually ever buy a game. They go up on a service and they rent it for the night. And you know, if you think about it, if I could rent Monopoly for a night for $1 and not have to clean up the cards and put the pieces back in the box, it's almost worth it for that alone. Certainly, you're not going to lose any more pieces. Finally, we have Jazz, your typical golf player, right? See him all the time. So, she's there all the time. What can I say? Anyway, so she's not really a gamer, but she's a golfer. She plays the Facebook closest to the hole 5 times a day with her friends. It's completely about bragging rights. It's about fitting into the social constructs. She's basically chasing the foursome and trying to make them look bad before she plays with them every Saturday morning. She plays Tiger Woods golf ubiquitously. We're going to talk about that across her netbook and her phone. She uses single-player golf to advance her course management skills. I got 2 stories about that. Who knows who Jacques Villeneuve is? There you go. Jacques Villeneuve, is that 1995 world driving champion? Went to Spa-Francorchamps, the most technical course in Formula 1, never driven it before, set the pole. When he was asked afterwards how that was possible, he says, well, I played it on the video games for the last 5 years. How hard could it be? I played in a Pro-Am in Las Vegas at the Summerlin course. And we have had the golf map, that particular golf course in our game for years. So I had literally played it probably 500 times in the computer and had found a particular way to play a hole there that you could play in real life. That was kind of a sneaky way. You didn't play straight at the hole. You played right and came back at it. And you had a much more direct shot and a safer shot in. I'm playing with Nolan Hinkey, a PGA Touring professional. He goes, what are you doing hitting over there? I said, it's an easier shot in. He goes laughing at me. I made birdie. He made 4. Finally, one other story. We also have a big change going on in our business. People don't think that gaming is just a trivial kids thing anymore. So I have a 70-year-old father, and they're starting to appear to be 70 years old. He had a very minor stroke about a year ago. Fully recovered. Small effect of his vocal characteristics, but he completely recovered. But what totally blew me away was his doctor asked him if he owned a DS. And he said, no. He says, you need to go buy one and buy Brain Age. The doctor prescribed him to play Brain Age. I want a business where my stuff gets prescribed because I know how to really make money. One of the other things that's coming into our business is streaming gaming. I'm not sure how many of you who's heard of OnLive or any of these things. Okay, you got some idea? Basically, the notion of what streaming gaming is, it's remote desktop for gaming. Basically, what it does is shoves as much of the hardware and the dollars and cents up the wire to the other end and tries to minimize the client-side It's all thin client stuff. Pretty much all of these use a streaming technology to convey that. Some of them, like Zevo, do things a little bit different. But all of them do the same thing. It is a dramatic change in our business in a couple of ways. One is the kind of games that are going to work on these systems, that are going to make money on these systems, are really going to be different. Number two is operating these systems at a profit is all about power management. And we have not spent any of my time in my business worrying about power management before. And so it's a very interesting trend in our business. How this is going to work from a service side, from a business model side, from a technology side is a very interesting and emerging stuff. And Pradeep and others and I have had some other discussions about this. This is really emerging and maybe the most exciting new thing in our business in a while. And then there's a whole world of web games. This is built on the Turbine engines from our friends at Instant Action. It's a game called Ball Blaster, which is basically a cross of Doom and Marble Madness, for those of you who remember. It's a social-based game that you download that engine and run it on your system. Increasingly, games like this are supplanting the mainstream PC games. They're quicker to get into, inexpensive, and people get very high value because they know what they're getting when they spend the money. Okay, so ubiquitous gaming is one of the key things that we think is going to be coming. When you are not selling to your core market, when you're not selling to somebody who defines themselves as a gamer, gaming needs to fit into their lifestyle, and most importantly, it needs to fit into their time scale. So the best way to think about it is currently when you play a mobile phone game, you know, when I'm standing in line at the airport, that 12-foot putt on my telephone is the most important thing in the world, unless the lady at the airline counter says next. Then it's the least important thing in my life. That is the nature of ubiquitous gaming. It's got to fit in and plug into your lifestyle. It cannot dominate your lifestyle, cannot impose on it. And we will get as much time as we earn in that context. So that's going to require us to do some different things, and we'll have a little demo of that here in a minute. But basically, what these little machines all mean to me is gaming ubiquity means the ability to play my game anywhere at any time. We are very close. So just to clarify what I mean, these are all multiple platforms that we can run on. The notion here would be I'd start a Tiger Woods game on one platform, a Unity-based, browser-based system, which I'll show you later. Then I'd bundle out of that, and then when I got on the car, I work on my handheld. When I get home, I play it on my 360. This is one contiguous round of golf. So I played 3 holes at work, 2 holes in the car on the way home, the rest when I got home. And maybe I didn't get that last hole done, so I'm going to finish the last one on my iPhone when I'm going out the door. So here's kind of how that works. Let's see if I can make this happen. So this is our Tiger online product. It's a Unity-based system. For those of you who don't know Unity, it's a 3D plugin for virtually every browser. This will run on literally almost everything. Runs on iPhones today, runs on virtually any platform that can have any kind of reasonable internet at all, and I don't mean a lot. You know, you give me half a megabit and I'm pretty happy. But we do have to load. So essentially what we did was we took the content from our Wii title and we figured out how to make it run completely in a browser with clunky internet. So there's an example of one of the courses. Let's see here, how am I going to do? Obviously not too well so far. No pressure. So essentially, this is almost exactly the same PC product we shipped literally a year ago, completely implemented on the web in almost a totally ubiquitous platform. So, oops, well, it'll be all right. Now, I could literally bail out of this laptop right now, get on his laptop, and start my session exactly where I left off. And that's true both across sessions and across machines. That kind of gaming ubiquity, we think, defines how people want to play games. The less gaming is the center of your life, the more likely you are about to be about one game. You're going to play Need for Speed, or you're going to play Tiger Woods, or you're going to play Madden, or you're going to play Pogo, or you're going to play Yahtzee. But you're not going to play 25 games. You're going to play one, and you're going to want that session to be persistent across your platforms and your locations. So that's what we think is shockingly close today. It didn't take much effort to accomplish, which means that we think we've got a strong future in that. Don't be cantankerous. There we go. Okay, so stuff beyond golf. Golf is a particularly wonderful example because, in truth, it is essentially a turn-based game that I need to send shot data. It's approximately, if I send 6 bytes, I've sent plenty. So it's not a terribly challenging product to run as online. When we first started doing online golf tournaments in 1999, we were doing them on 300 baud modems with voice chat over cell phones. So we could do that in 1999. Today we can do obviously a lot more. Golf in some ways is a trick. However, not really always a trick. Sometimes the game you play won't be the same game. So if I'm playing The Sims on my machine and it's about the whole town, maybe when I leave the house, I take The Sims with me in an RV that runs on my phone. And they live in a smaller world and a unique one that's in that space. And oh, by the way, they know where I am. So when I drive by the Grand Canyon, they send postcards home. There are things like shooters. So many of you, I'm sure, have played some first-person shooters. It's pretty hard to produce a fully ubiquitous shooter game. But that doesn't mean I can't have a gunsmith application that allows you to make your gun 2.6% more accurate by spending 2 to 3 hours refining its exact capabilities. Finally, you can take things that you can take creative things offline. So in this case, there's no particular reason that for our Nerf shooting game that you can't make shooting range construction something that's done offline. These are all examples of things that can be done to support or supplement the product play that you do at home. Gaming ubiquity basically allows you to fit into other lifestyles, and that's the core thing. For me to get people outside of the core, I'm not going to turn them into core gamers. I have to come to them. It creates value outside of the core game. We have to figure out how to create conductivity and persistence that runs outside of just sitting at the home for the 10-foot experience. So what this means for you: profits. We're going to continue to have to work on profits, and for me to reach the non-core, they are not going to spend $500 for a gaming console. They're probably not going to spend $300 for a gaming console. They probably don't want to spend anything for their gaming console. And so I'm going to have to run on hardware they have. There are lots of different interesting ways to do that. Clearly, the phones and computers that people have are very capable today. And things like the Open Screen initiative from Adobe that essentially puts flash players in television sets and set-top boxes is another way that we're going to get there. But we're going to have to figure out how to make things cheaper for this audience because they're just not interested in spending the money that we'd like them to. Power. It's an A123 cell. I've heard you guys spend a lot of time talking about this. I clearly understand it's a huge, big issue nowadays. It basically defines everything that gets done on the hardware side. It's increasingly defining what happens from the user experience side, too. So this is an A123 cell. I think you guys probably know about its capabilities. For the last couple of years, I'm sure that those of you who've been engineering new devices have been very irritated by the supply of lithium-ion batteries. If you think it's bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till there are 7,000 of them going in every one of these things. So currently, my understanding, I'm a little bit of an aficionado about high-performance electric cars, but my understanding is China will produce this year more electric vehicles than have been produced in history before, in 1 year. This is going to change things, boys. Just putting your hands on the power cells necessary is going to become a challenge. So there are consumers that operate outside of our core technology area that are going to start to become our competitors for resources in ways we've never imagined. Persistence. I am done putting contacts in my phone. I will never type another phone number or another name into my phone again. If I have a phone that requires it, it will be thrown away on the instant. And that's pretty much the way most people feel. I kind of know something about this stuff, and I'm definitely getting into that bottom category. Technology is so overwhelming, I don't even care anymore. It does most of my functionality, and I don't have to be so focused on it. This is representative of the core of our, no longer representative of the core of our business, but this is the mass of our audience. They are interested in technology for what it enables them to do, but not for itself. The last part of one of the most important parts is people. I described earlier that one of the biggest changes in our business was the demise of what I call immersive gaming. For the first 20 years I was in the business, my job was to build a gaming experience that pulled you through the screen to the other side and made 20 hours disappear from the clock. And sometimes I did a really good job of that. But in truth, the majority of the new people in here do not want that experience. They want gaming to be a socially enabling activity in some fashion or another. They want it to be about people, not about the game. So increasingly, we're having to change our focus for how do we talk to people. That's new user interfaces. That's what we've seen with the Wii and Guitar Hero and on the iPhone. But it's also about accessible concepts, and it's about accessible technology. To get these broader audiences, we have to come to them. We cannot ask them to come to us. Oh yeah, then there's one other kind, which is, okay, I can't spell. Well, anyway, you get the idea. One of the things that I think we don't take, that my business doesn't take for granted, that I think every other business does, is that what is core about getting a piece of technology to be adopted by somebody is that absolutely internal sense of delight. If you do not elicit that internal sense of delight, if you do not make these people's faces appear, you're not going to sell any of your hardware. So from my perspective, start thinking about fun. Who's having a better time than that guy? He's my hero. And they're not having such a good time. Must be bad game. So these videos are from something we do called RAM testing, relative accessibility metric. We look at the first 30-minute experiences that people have with our products, usually in pairs. Turns out that people will never tell you what they'll say to each other in the room. So, you know, these two guys, those two kids back there, they will tell each other how much this game sucks for 25 minutes. And then I come in and I run the survey. It was a nice game. I liked it. So what we've found is they do a better job of talking to themselves. So that's pretty much all I have to say today. The key things from my perspective are people matter more. We got to get back to them. Fun matters as a big component. Obviously, power matters a lot. You guys have noticed that. Figuring out how to be in the persistence business, how to make devices talk to each other and maintain state and context between them. We can do some pretty fabulous stuff if we have some help there. So I'm looking forward to what you guys will produce in the future. When I first came here in 1983, I took down a poster in Las Vegas and hung it up on my wall of the chip map from a 6502. You guys are still my heroes. Thanks a lot. Pretty good. Off by 30 seconds. I've got time for questions. Oh, come on. I'm not that scary.
Please use the microphone.
He's ready.
Yeah.
So, I'm Todd Besnick, and I'm looking for a job. I am male, but I'm willing to be flexible.
Your jokes are better than mine. What can I do for you?
So my question is OpenCL.
What do I think about OpenCL? I think OpenCL, like the iPhone, is a great opportunity for a number of customers who would not otherwise get to participate in the business of creating things to do that. There are some very good things about it, and there's some very impractical for commercial purposes aspects of it. What I find is that people use it as a prototyping environment, and it quickly gets displaced at our shop. That doesn't mean that's how it's going to be forever, but it is how it is today. Yes, sir.
Alex Solomatnikov, Hacking Systems. I have two questions, actually. So you said about OnLive, and I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what would be the requirement for the servers? Do you see it as different from other applications that people run on the servers? And second question about, also kind of related to that, if you have these boxes with multi-core systems, do you see yourself as using these multi-core systems just to run different instances of the game, or will you try to parallelize them?
Yeah, good question. So let's see here. Number one, OnLive server capabilities, you probably need to talk to them more about it specifically. I'll talk about streaming technology in general. There are about 7 different players that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there are a couple I'm not, but in that space. All of them are working on maximum efficiencies of the back end. From my perspective, as I've evaluated it, how these systems are going to get adopted is that they are a value play versus the current hardware consoles. And so if you think about your current platform cost per year, your annual platform cost per year, if you buy a 360 system for $400, it's about $125 a year. Simple math. That means you need to drive up that much value up the wire. In other words, produce that same amount of value at a dramatically lower price to make that profit business work. The keys to that are going to be getting lots of instances on every one of those servers simultaneously, lots of different versions of the same game running for multiple users, and maximizing your power contributions and software utilization. So for us, when we've done back-of-the-envelope evaluation on this, power costs and server costs are very important. Power costs look to me like they're the bigger long-term issue, because almost all the other trends, Moore's law, bandwidth costs, almost every other trend is down except power, which means over time it's going to get worse. So I would say one thing, power supply improvements. That would be the number one thing I want, which is what everybody else wants. Your other question, remind me.
About multi-core. So my understanding is you would run just like multiple virtual machines on these boxes.
Yes, I think that's right.
So
that's the current
You won't
option.
try to parallelize and use multi-core to speed up particular.
Yeah, I think so. The question is, how do you adopt to that instance protocol? A lot of it depends on how much you have to depend on the GPU in that implementation or not. So if I'm running a Wii grade product, maybe I don't have to be quite so dependent on a GPU. Then I'm after parallelizing it because I'm going to basically reproduce the functionality of a GPU and a CPU so that I can generically deploy that wherever I want. If that makes any sense. I'm probably not making sense. Talk to me afterwards. I'll see if I can explain it better. Yes, sir.
My question is about Flex. If you're using a Flash player,
Sure.
Is the bulk of your development going to be on Flex in the future?
Absolutely. So Flex, Air, and Flash are all we think are extraordinarily important platforms for the future. One of the issues for me is that if you've got 75 different items, if I have to build a native application for 75 different pieces of hardware, I do not have a business model. I just don't. And so Flash and Flex and Air are methods for us to abstract those differences that are very constructive for us, especially for things like menus. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dean Takahashi at VentureBeat. How much investment do you think has to happen to get the user interfaces to sort of the level where you want them, relative to how much enormous investment has gone into 3D graphics to make games more realistic?
You're talking about hardware or software?
Yeah, just really to get what you want, to get the hardware and software systems into the space where, it's exactly where you want it to be.
I'm probably not qualified with the hardware side, but I'll do my best. What we have seen is that the first generation of motion controllers from people like Nintendo have been fabulous devices with great limitations. And some of those limitations have been useful and some of them have not. The second generation of systems that came out, including the Motion Plus from Nintendo, made substantial inroads. For us, the characteristics of that kind of a motion controller that we were after is we need to know what direction we're always pointing in. So the sensor bar approach just is too much of a limitation for most customers. They get lost and can't get themselves back. The other issue with those products is, in general, it's about 100 milliseconds of latency. And that's a lot. That's 2 frames for most of our customers from a gameplay standpoint. Figuring out how to make both those communications happen faster and figuring out how to do more of the processing actually inside of the motion controller, I think are key to fixing that problem. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and for something like Natal, what sort of computing power do you think you need?
I think Natal, I don't know anything, but from what I can tell, Natal's power requirements have been the biggest limitation in what they can accomplish. Being USB powered has pretty much dictated what they can do. To be honest, it's a totally workable system. I think what I've seen of what they're up to and what Sony's up to and what Nintendo's next generation systems look like, they're all totally capable, have made really good progress. But Natal is after, I think, dramatically different customers than the Wiimote is. That's a totally different game construct. Yes, sir. He looks like a customer.
Yeah. No. James Donald, NVIDIA. Do you have any thoughts on augmented reality, what that is and where it's going?
Yeah, that's interesting. So we spent a little bit of time on the home stuff for Sony. And we were trying to figure out if there was something there. Sony was really compelling, made a compelling case to us why we should do that, so we did. I'm still not convinced that people want to spend a tremendous amount of their time doing that. The augmented reality kind of thing that, for instance, is done in jet fighters and stuff like that, where you're adding information context to it, that kind of information design we've kind of done from the very beginning, but mostly because we didn't have the bits to show it the right way. So the short answer is that's not where our energy is going right now. That mostly drives immersive gameplay, and that's just not the growing part of the segment. The social, what we call social gaming on this side of the screen, has been where most of the growth is and where the new customers are coming from. So short answer is probably not a lot right now. Yes, sir.
Jim Kale, IBM. You're talking about input devices, and does that going to get associated with core gamers instead of the new persistent? I mean,
no, it's the opposite. Yeah, it's the opposite. So Nintendo, I'm not sure what the source is. Who knows? I may violate some non-disclosure here, but Nintendo, I believe, did a study where they proved that non-core gamers will pick up a one-handed controller more than twice as often as a two-handed one. And so the Wiimote is really designed around that notion. And every time you see a game that's got the nunchuck in there, I always think that's a design failure. From my perspective, the notion on the Wii is get it all to run on the Wiimote as much as possible. Because what people are, they're as comfortable picking that up as they are the remote control for their television. So unless they're my currently now 103-year-old and dead grandmother who was sure she was going to light the drapes on fire with the infrared signal from her remote, pretty much everybody else is okay. So the short answer has been one-handed controls unlock non-core gamers, almost universally.
And then new mobile devices?
Yeah, it turns out that silly Guitar Hero plastic guitar, people will do things with that they wouldn't do with anything else. Of course, my humble opinion now is if Guitar Hero had a breathalyzer built into it, their sales would be half. Yes, sir.
Hi, Deepak Sherlekar, Broad Logic. How important compression, decompression algorithms and such for streaming-based games?
Almost everything we do now has compression and decompression in it. Even our console titles, to make the loads be reasonable, we're heavily compressing data in and out of those systems. So compression is layer upon layer all the way through our systems nowadays. And
any hardware-based schemes that are needed on either side of it, either on the client side or the...
Well, so the OnLive guys have taken hardware, and it's an integral part of their design for OnLive. And I think that that's one aspect that might make some sense. The problem that I have is the hardware-oriented codecs, especially in the client side, dramatically reduce the machines that I can run on. So I'm trying to avoid them if I can at this stage.
Thanks.
We got one guy left. This will be the last guy, because he's got the right shirt on. So there you go.
Peter Teshin, ex-Atari, now at Naval Postgraduate School.
Great.
What is your thoughts about...
You went backwards. I started out at the test site and went from the military to the private sector. You went the other way around.
I thought you'd think that was interesting. What do you think of Steve Perlman's new company and just general opinions about the direction they're going and how successful...
Yeah, that's the streaming gaming stuff. I'm a big fan. John Rigatello, our president, is a big believer that matters a lot. We think especially in markets that are not traditional North America or Western Europe, that this is a gaming system that's likely to be very important simply because of the economics. So yeah, we're a big believer. Steven is one of several players. To be honest, there are two that have already deployed. So Playcast out of Israel is 5,000 test users as we speak. There are about 6,000 in northern France for Stream My Game. Steven is supposed to go beta sometime this fall. We'll see what happens. I'm a big believer.
Do you think they'll go down into the iPhones and the BlackBerries as one of their portals? Yeah,
Jules Auerbach, who runs a competitor called Otoy, has already demonstrated that tech. So this is, there are a lot of people in my business go, this is not possible. I've seen more really smart engineers in my business disbelieve their own eyes than I've ever seen in any other event in our business. So there's a certain amount of skepticism built in particular around latency. I don't judge that to be the issue. I judge the quality of that latency to be much more of an issue. When I'm going to put 2.5 megabits per second over somebody's line, I'm pretty subject to what else is happening in my neighborhood. So we're going to have to figure out how to solve that problem. But you can make choices that make that problem a lot simpler. And there are many game design decisions that we can make that reduce that footprint substantially from 2.5 to 1 or even lower in some cases.
Would you have then applications running on the client side to make the autonomy of that experience be different for that user?
Yeah, my opinion is if you're going to go streaming gaming, it's a thin client thing, go all the way. The economies of scale come from fully adopting that notion. There's any kind of split, the economics fall apart, at least for me, the modeling I've done. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.